my name is Delaney Davies, and today I will be cooking salty sea perfect tender shrimp. My ingredients are 26 to 30 shrimp, large shrimp in shells, and a large seafood seasoning boil bag. I use Zatarain's, salt, onion, and lemon. And then I will be testing the difference between boiling shrimp for 4.5 minutes of total cook time versus boiling shrimp for cooking shrimp at a simmer, starting the 4.5 minute cook time after the simmer has been reachieved once I've added the shrimp into the water. And I believe that the result will be that the shrimp cooked for less time will be more tender, will be more enjoyable, while the shrimp cooked for a longer period of time will be tough. So first up, I wanted to take my onion and my lemon, and I wanted to quarter them, which is what I'm doing here. And then I was ready to bring my water and my seasonings all to a boil. So I did 6 cups of water, and I then added my seafood seasoning bag, my 1.5 tablespoons of salt, the quartered onion, and the quartered lemon, and then I brought that all to a boil so that the flavors could be released into the water and could create a flavorful water mixture. That way, once I was done with boiling the water, and I was done simmering the water over the low heat for about 4 minutes, I could take out that water and I could use it as a flavored water for my ice cube bowl when we're done cooking the shrimp. So here you can see that my boil has been achieved, and I'm ready to start my 4-minute timer and to let it simmer, to continue to just kind of let those flavors kind of mix out throughout. And then now I was ready to take out my 2 cups of flavored liquid and to be used for the ice bath. And here I decided to go ahead and do 1/2 cup and then 1/2 cup. That way I wasn't like burning myself with it. And I split my 2 cups into 2 separate bowls. So I put a cup in one bowl and a cup in another bowl, since I'm doing 2 different experiments, so that way I didn't get the shrimp mixed up that I took out early versus the shrimp I left in for a little bit longer. And then I'm ready to start my pot that I'm going to boil the shrimp in. So to get that ready for the shrimp, you add an additional 6 cups of water to the 4 cups of seasoned or flavored water that you have previously had. Here you can kind of see all that, and then you bring that back to a full boil. So while that was cooking, I went ahead and started to add my ice. The ice is just to help cool down the water and then to eventually help keep the shrimp tender once it's taken out of the boil. Periodically, I would just add a little more ice once I thought that the ice was getting a little too melted, just to keep that water allow the water to keep cooling down and then become super cold. So at this point, my water has reachieved a boil, and it's time to add my shrimp to the mixture. Once I have directly added the shrimp, I start my first 4.5 minutes time to test the 4.5 minute of total cook time. Then once that was done, I was ready to take them out. I kind of just touched them to see if they were okay, and I was putting them into their ice bath. Since the bag said that I had 26 to 30, I estimated that I should take out about 14, since that would be about in between those 2 halves. The bag ended up having a lot more than 26 to 30, and therefore the other set of shrimp had a lot more shrimp in it. However, I don't really think that affected my thing. It's not really shown here very well, but the simmer had been reachieved at that point. It happened like very shortly after the shrimp came off. Also, because the shrimp never was boiled at a simmer before, but it was very close to being at a simmer when I took the first set of shrimp out. But obviously it was time to take out my second set of shrimp and to put them into its ice bath, and they sat in that ice bath for about 5 minutes, kind of soaking in the flavors of that water and then letting them cool back down and kind of firm up without actually firm up and then take in some more moisture without actually making them less tender, if that makes sense. So here I'm just going to use some of this time to talk about the cooking methods I was used and some of the things that those were actually doing to the shrimp that I was cooking. So first off, shrimp are obviously a protein, and proteins, as we learned in the egg section, when you cook them, they become denatured and they kind of, those proteins spirals kind of unfold from each other. And so it's the same concept as this, but you are doing it with shrimp instead of eggs. So when you are cooking the shrimp, the proteins are being squeezed together, and that squeezing of the proteins are actually pushing moisture out. And once the moisture has been pushed out and the proteins are squeezed together, they are shrinking and they become drier and tough. So the longer you cook them, the smaller and the tougher they become. It's actually really easy to overcook shrimp or even lobster, and it can become so tough that you have to have a knife to cook it if you cook it for so long. And that just kind of depends on how long you cook it and how gentle you are with the cooking. So it depends on how high you raise the temperature or how long you cook it at. So in fact about that, you can overcook or shrimp at even a boil or even a simmer, and you can make that meat really tough at those temperatures. And honestly, a simmer is at around 185 degrees. And in the reading, it talks about how proteins begin to lose moisture, just a little moisture, at over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And they begin to lose considerable amounts of moisture between 150 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a lot more than what your simmer is. So again, your simmer is around 185. So when it's at that simmering point that it is at, you're losing quite a bit of moisture in between, which is attributing to them becoming a little tougher and then becoming less tender, essentially, because they're losing that moisture. Another thing I want to note real quick is that I used the cooked shrimp, as I mentioned, and that does affect it a little bit. I didn't really mean to use cooked shrimp, and I didn't even realize it until after I finished cooking it. I was throwing away my bag that I used the cooked shrimp. So this did affect the texture a little bit. But since I cooked that away, you still got a difference in them, and you could still tell a difference. The other thing is that they were already deveined, so all I had to do once they came out of the water was just peel them, which is what I'm doing here. But once I was ready to taste test them, I noticed that the shrimp that had been cooked for less time was much more tender and was not tough, and comparatively the other shrimp was quite tough compared to the shrimp that was cooked for just 4.5 minutes total time. It was also at one point described as rubbery by my family. I didn't really get that, but I could see how they could get there with that. So it was quite tough, and that was considered, it was at that simmer the whole time. That was probably due to the fact that it was losing lots of moisture and it wasn't being really re-added until it was put into the water, the cold bath. The other thing I noticed was that the shrimp that was boiled for longer was more flavorful. So it had a lot of more of those flavors, that profiles that you were seeing with the Zatarain's, and it was quite tasty actually. I preferred it because of that, and I didn't really mind the texture, and several of my family members were like that too. And then one other thing I would like to talk about, because I just found it quite interesting, was that there was actually a shrimp that got cooked for a very long time. So for my meal that I made with this, we made just a full seafood boil with like potatoes, sausage, and corn that we added into after I was done cooking. So that cooked for a significantly more amount of time. I wasn't really paying attention, so I don't know exact times, but for a while longer. And that shrimp actually became very tough, and it was almost inedible. The other thing I saw, which you could just see right there a little second ago, was that the shrimp that was cooked for less time was more in like a candy cane shape, whereas the shrimp that was cooked for more time kind of swirled up into itself and became a ball. And again, right there where you could see when I was peeling it apart, it was harder for me to peel apart. But it did look stringier compared to the other, if you can see it there, which I found quite interesting, so I would have thought that would have been the opposite. Thank you.